So for a long time now, I don't know how many months, I've had this little annoying thought in the back of my head every once in a while. And I'll be reading a bunch of red pill ideas and I'll be thinking about a bunch of red pill stuff, and it'll be quite fascinating. And then I'll get a little bit tired and I'll need to switch gears because I love reading new stuff. I love constantly taking in new stuff, but I have to switch gears every once in a while because if I focus on something for, too much time all at once, it just kind of starts to drain me. The words start blurring together, the ideas start mushing. And so I constantly have to have new ideas that I'm switching over to. Like I'll learn a bunch about the red pill and then I'll switch over to herpetology. And then when I'm done with that, I'll go back to red pill and it will be kind of fresh and my brain will have a chance to reset. And so I can learn more stuff, which is always very, very exciting for me. I love learning new things. And so it stimulates my mind and it's very pleasurable for me. But I have to switch it up every once in a while. And I've noticed that when I get tired in red pill stuff after I've been reading a bunch of it or listening to a bunch of it, it's like, okay, I got to switch things up a bit. And I have this moment where it's like, yeah, I got to go back to reality. And the very first time that happened, it was like, oh, okay, wait a minute. What do you mean you need to go back to reality? Presumably, red pill is reality. So what do you mean you need to get back to the real world? What does that mean? Because I'm assuming that I don't know a hell of a lot about cognitive dissonance. It's a relatively new term for me, but I'm assuming that is cognitive dissonance. The idea that you have these ideas and beliefs that you're presumably believing in, that you're saying, oh, this is real. But then when you step away from it, it's like, well, now I got to get back to reality. So what's reality? Because whatever reality is, I'm pretty sure that's real. And red pill, the reason I think it's so fascinating is, generally speaking, it's reality. It applies to reality beautifully. And I find that, gives me a nice, tingly, happy feeling. It's like, ooh, yay. But what happens when it doesn't? And that's been a question that's been bothering me for quite a while. And I didn't want to say anything about it. For months, I haven't said anything about it because it's like, well, I don't want to talk about it until I've kind of pinpointed what it is that just doesn't sit well with me. Because just saying something doesn't sit well with me, something doesn't feel right, that's not providing you guys with much information. I will say that in all my videos, I try very, very hard to be as honest and accurate as I can. I don't try to sugarcoat things, I don't try to gloss over things, and I definitely won't say anything that I don't believe when I say it, at the point that I say it. It might need some elaboration, I don't know, but for the most part, I try very hard to be honest with what I say. So it's not like I've been saying things in my videos where it's like, oh, this doesn't feel right when I say it. But there has been this little part of me that's been kind of sitting here going, something's not right. And I just don't know what it is. And I got a comment 2 weeks ago now. And it kind of, it sort of led me down this little path of interesting. And I think I figured out what it is that just doesn't quite, or at least one of the things that doesn't quite add up to me. And it's hand in hand with this idea that women don't feel love. Immediately when I started reading red pill stuff, I found guys, usually in more black-pilled or slightly more MGTOW than regular red pill kinds of groups, guys saying that women are not actually capable of love. And I've seen it multiple times now. It's not a singular phenomenon. It happens every once in a while in the red pill community. Women aren't actually capable of love. Women love men in a transactional kind of way. You give me your resources, I give you my sex. And I think somebody introduced me to Donovan Sharp's work at one point, and I watched one of his videos just recently. He was talking about how the relationship that a man has with a prostitute is the most honest sexual relationship that two people can have. The prostitute gives the man her sex for his money, and he gives her his resources for her sex. And that's honesty in a relationship. And I'm sorry, that's bullshit. Like, I like half of what Donovan Sharp says because he can say some things that are really right on point. And then he says stuff like that, and I'm like, you're just wrong. And so, if he's wrong, how is he wrong? And where does this idea that women aren't capable of love coming from in the first place? And I think it kind of originates with Rollo Tomassi's Iron Rule number 6, which is, I think I got it memorized, um, women cannot ever love men in the way that men feel they deserve to be loved or feel that they should be loved. Um, and I remember I read Rational Male. He went through and multiple times, I believe, very clearly stated that this did not mean that women were incapable of love. Of course, women are capable of love. Women love differently than men love. And at that part, it gets a little fuzzy for me because there are days that I look at it as like, okay, I think I get that. And then there are days that I look at it as like, I'm not sure I do get that. Here's the point where I find myself just not getting it. I know the way that I love my husband. And it's a very solid kind of love. I decided that I loved him. Decided that I loved him might actually be the right way to say it. I had gotten to know him really early on before we were dating. For over a month, I realized that I was attracted to him through, the latter half of that month. And I finally entered into a romantic relationship with him at the end of about a month of time. And I realized that he was, the man I wanted to marry on that first date. So there came a point, like, within the time frame of that first date. I remember it was like the next morning, and I was making coffee, and I was sitting in the kitchen, like I was alone in the kitchen making the coffee, and he was still lying in the bed. And I was thinking to myself, because it was very rapid for me. It was like, okay, now we're in a romantic relationship, and now I want to marry him. Do I want to spend the rest of my life with this man? And there was one part of me that was very certain that, yes, of course we want to spend the rest of your life with this man. And there was another part of me that was like, okay, this is all happening very, very quickly, and part of me at least needs to catch up with this notion. And that was the last time that I'm ever aware of asking myself, could you do better? Is this really the best you can do? Is this really what you want? All those questions. And he happened to walk into the kitchen just as I was asking those questions, and I looked up and I saw him, and I just studied him so intently. And it was like, is this really what you want? Yes or no, you don't get to unmake this decision. And I looked at him and was like, well, yes, this is actually what I want. And I looked at him so clearly. I remember I saw every little flaw that I had ever noticed about him, and I saw every little thing about him that I had ever liked. And I was weighing them all up very, very carefully. And that was the end of that decision. It was like, after that, I was like, okay, yes, this is the one I want. And that was it. That was the end of it. After that, everything that I had, all my energy was put into strengthening the relationship, building up the relationship. I looked at it and I thought of it as like a small, fragile plant, a little teeny seedling. And a young plant is so very tender and so very delicate. You have to really baby it and nurture it. And I treated my relationship with my husband that way. It was precious, and I had to take care of it. I had to protect it. I had to help it grow healthy and strong. And so that was what I put my energy into. There was no moment of, well, could you do better? No, I'd already made that decision. We were moving on from there. And so a lot of these ideas that I encounter in the Red Pill, the idea that women are always asking in the back of their head, could I do better? I remember addressing that one in my review of Rollo Tomassi's book and thinking to myself, well, maybe I'm just not aware of it enough. I've done a lot of soul searching on this one. I've done a lot of time and thought and introspection, just trying to figure out if there's even a little tiny sliver of me asking, well, could I do better? And I couldn't find it. And it was like, well, the best that I can do is take note of the fact that I'm extremely proud of the things that he does. He'll do something, and he's just an impressive human being, and so he'll do something impressive, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm so very proud that I'm his wife. It is a point of great pride for me to be the wife of a man like him, because he's an incredible person. And so that was the best I could do. It was like, well, maybe there's something way, way, way down below the surface that's, taking little moments of monitoring and little, peeking up quickly to check and see, and then say, okay, all's well here, this is definitely good. And so this is the best you can do, and you're fine, and that's it. And so it will give me little moments of positive feedback, little flashes of pride and joy, and it's like, okay, I did well for myself, and that's it. That was the very best that I could come up with, because there was no way that I was asking in the back of my mind in any way that I've been able to find consciously. And people talk about the subconscious like I'm never going to be aware of it. It's like, if you look deep enough into yourself, long enough and hard enough, first of all, you're going to see some scary ass things, but that's okay. Everybody's got that shit. But second of all, you're going to find the questions that you're asking yourself in the back of your mind. You know, if it's there to be found, I would have found it, and it just wasn't there. And so the only thing I could come up with is maybe it is so deeply buried that there's no way I can make myself aware of it, which is pretty weak. But, you know, I said that, and I mean, it could be true. It could be true. That could be it. And I was trying very hard to be open-minded. I was trying very hard to be accepting of these very new ideas, but it's never sat quite right with me in the time since then, because I still haven't encountered me asking, could I do better? It's not happening. I'm not asking that question. I don't pay attention to that kind of issue. I have what I wanted, and that's it. There is no questioning it. I made the decision almost 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago. We're coming up on the 10-year mark. Ooh, yay. Almost exactly 10 years ago, I made the decision. It was like, all right, is this or is this not what you want? This decision is final. And, you know, that was what the little voice inside my head was saying. This decision is final. Do you or do you not? This is all very sudden. It's all very dizzying. It's all very disconcerting. It's all too fast. And at the same time, you're making the choice. Do you want this man for the rest of your life, or do you not want this man for the rest of your life? Your decision is final. And I decided I wanted him for the rest of my life. And I just never have questioned it since then. I've never at any point, like, it's just, this is it. This is it. And so, you know, when I look at the type of love that we've built up, going back to this, you know, can women actually love in the way that men expect? You know, I'm sure there are ways that I don't love in the way that he would expect. I'm sure there are different ways in I behave to demonstrate love. You know, I'm a terrible housekeeper, and he loves neatness and cleanliness, and I am working on it. At which point I really ought to apologize for the dishwasher and the washing machine, both of which are currently running. But the house looks nice, and so that's good. You know, I'm trying to be a good housewife, and it's not something I was ever particularly skilled in. It's not something I was trained to do when I was young. Let's just put it that way. I'm a very modern woman in the sense that I wasn't taught to be a housewife. In fact, I was taught that I should work on my career, and being a housewife is just, you know, who wants to do that? You know, have ambition in your life, girl. So I'm playing catch up with all that stuff, all the domestic stuff, and I've been playing catch up with it for years, and I get better. But you know, I probably would have gotten better faster if I actually cared about this sort of stuff. But it's very difficult to make myself really care about it, and I know that it's important to him. And so on the one hand, I'm working on it because it's important to him, but on the other hand, I'm not working on it nearly as hard as I should be, because even though it's important to him, I just don't care about it. You know, I don't necessarily love him in the way that he would like to be loved. I have shortcomings. I have flaws. I try. And I try to regularly show him demonstrations of my affection for him. You know, I regularly bring him hot cups of coffee. I try to make good food for him. Although he likes cooking, so today he made really good food for me instead. I'm a very lucky woman. He's a good cook. But you know, I look at it and it's like, I get it. I get that a woman's love is never going to be exactly the way that a man expects to be loved. And I even get that as a woman, I don't get it. That I'm never going to fully understand exactly this idea. It's a little bit too far outside my scope of experience. It's a little bit too abstracted for me. I don't necessarily understand what it means, even having read it so many times, it's still sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it just slips right outside my grasp. But the love that I have for my husband is also not transactional. I think it's reasonably safe to assume that there are multiple layers of love that I have for my husband. There is the layer that's transactional. I love the way he makes me feel. I love his company. I love spending time with him. I love his humor. I love his wit. I love engaging in conversations with him that are interesting and intellectually stimulating. And I love the ideas that he comes up with, and I love his insight into the world around us and how very sharp it is. But I also just love him. He's been with me for, about 10 years. He's my best friend. Why wouldn't I love him? Of course I love him. There's that just natural, well, of course I love him. Of course I care about him. Of course I care about whether he's happy. Of course I care about his well-being. Of course I care about his health. There's no questioning that. There's no something therefore I love him kind of formula going on back there. It's like, well, he is my husband. We've been together 10 years. We've devoted ourselves to one another. We got married. In the process of getting married, we each made a very solemn promise to the other. I will stick with you through thick and thin. And we have done that. We've been through very unpleasant things. How many times have I been in the hospital with him? How many times has he taken care of me in the hospital? How many times has he? I remember right after I nearly died. I was soaked in my own blood. I was literally bathing in a puddle of my own blood, and they let him into the room, and I reached out for his hand. Of course, I've told this story before, but I reached out for his hand, and mine was just bright cherry red with blood. And I wiped my hand off with a wet wipe, and I finally got to hold his hand, and that was the most amazing feeling. It was almost as magical as the first time you touch a lover's hand, almost as magical as that first kiss. It was magical on that level. Like, there was something just incredibly powerful about that moment where I had survived a scrape with death, and they had stabilized me, and he hadn't known when he said goodbye to me and that he loved me whether he was ever going to see me alive again. And the two of us were back together, and it was like we're both a little bit shaken. I think he was more shaken than I was. I firmly believe that it is much easier to be the person lying in the hospital bed than it is to be the person taking care of the person lying in the hospital bed when it comes to relationships. That's just something at least for us, I believe that. And, he was a little shaken. His wife nearly died. And I was, trying to recover. I was perking up again. They'd given me a blood transfusion. I was starting to feel a hell of a lot better than I had. And, I just reached for his hand. It was this magical moment where it was like, I would not want to be anywhere else with any other human being in all of the world than that man. He was the person, the one person in all of the world that I wanted to be with, and there he was. There's just nothing transactional about that. I'm sorry. You don't make that into a transactional thing. You don't make that into a I need resources, I need moral support, I need comfort, I need attention, I need the fun, sexy tingles, and therefore, because you give them to me, now I love you. I mean, you might be able to try and squeeze it into that little box and try to make it fit, but the truth is, at that moment, I just loved him because he was him. I loved him because he was there, and because we had formed this bond with each other, and we were both still alive to share in that bond. And it's a big deal. And I have this tendency to think that the things you think and say and do in the face of death, those things, they mean something. You're being pretty honest when you're dealing with death. You don't have the time or the luxury of being superficial. So when things, when deadly things come about, you get a little bit of a glimpse into your innermost thoughts and beliefs. And that can be a valuable thing. And my innermost thoughts and beliefs apparently are that he's the only person in the world that I want to be with. And I want to spend the rest of my life making this journey through life by his side, with him and not with anybody else. I was sent a message about 2 weeks ago, and I found out about this thing called deep conversion. And I'd like to read to you about deep conversion. And I don't think this is going to make anybody particularly happy, but it's something that I think it's like the missing piece of a really big puzzle. Without it, the puzzle it's not complete. And it will never be complete and will never be accurate. It will never show a real picture of anything because it's an incomplete puzzle. Parts are missing. And it's not even that simple. Like a puzzle is just little bits of color and pattern that all fit together to make a picture. If you're missing a single puzzle piece, you can still see the picture. This is more like one thread that's woven through a big tapestry. It touches on everything. You miss this piece and you don't have the full tapestry. You're missing a significant portion of it because even though you've got, this huge tapestry, you're missing all the little things that it touches on. So let's talk about this. So Rollo Tomassi wrote an article, and the article is called Deep Conversion. It's one of his blog posts. He was inspired to write his article by another article also titled Deep Conversion by a man named Nick Krauser, whom I'm not particularly familiar with. When I read Nick Krauser's article, Deep Conversion, he defined deep conversion at the very beginning of it, conveniently, as total submission of body and soul in which the woman trusts and admires you so much she presents her whole being to you to do as you please. Which sounds like my relationship with my husband in a very fun and enjoyable way. And it also sounds really true. Like, I get that. That makes perfect sense to me. I read that, it was like, okay, this sounds like me. Which, I mean, somebody had texted me, they were like, or commented to me, they were like, yeah, this sounds like you. And I was like, what is it? And yeah, sounds like me. And I read about it in both of their articles, each of which is titled Deep Conversion, so it's going to get a little confusing when I write down the quotes here. And I thought, why the hell didn't somebody mention this before? And so I spent all of last week being very irritable about it. And to be fair, I don't know exactly when he wrote his first Rational Male book. And so for all I know, he included this article into other later Rational Male books. And yeah, he might have mentioned this in one of his other books, which, by the way, I ordered another one of his books. I'm going to be reviewing that because I'm curious to figure out whether or not he's mentioned this. Nick Krauser in his article says, I don't deny the legal system is anti-male, nor do I deny the rigmarole of dealing with bitchy, shit-testing women, or the deep-seated genuine differences between male and female hardwiring for love. But these are extremes, and by these he's referring to MRIs whining about getting divorce raped or losing their one-itis, PUAs jumping through endless hoops to score a little extra pussy, name PUAs redefining their end goals to deny happy, committed girls can be kept in that state long-term, and manosphere speculation on women's incapacity to love men as they wish to be loved. He's talking about all this, and he's talking about it being extremes. And I think that's interesting. And he talks about these complaints that men have about the problems that arise with women, and he says it's the weak and stupid who bear the brunt. So while it's worth outlining exactly what the brunt is, don't become obsessed with it. If you know how to deeply convert a girl, you are managing the risk to almost zero. Almost zero is emphasized. And that's interesting to me. It's like, would I wander off, like so many guys have told me so many times, that I would simply wander off and chase after some Chad if I found a guy who was a more hypergamously pleasing than my husband. And I'm not paying attention to other men. It's like, I don't think that would happen because I'm already committed. I've already made my choice. I've already made my bed and now I'm laying in it. I'm not out there looking for other men. I mean, I might meet other men and think, oh, that guy's a catch, but that's not my catch. I got mine. Mine's over that way. I don't need more. I don't need another. I don't need other men. And this is something I think is kind of difficult for a lot of red pill guys to understand. Because I don't think they really believe me. I think they think I'm fooling myself somehow. And it's like, no, this is it. And so it's interesting to me that, if you do this deep conversion thing, and I think deep conversion is kind of funny. He talks about it at one point as soul surrender, and I think that's a very interesting turn of a phrase to be used by a jaded PUA. Like, when do you ever hear jaded PUAs talking about a woman, giving her soul, surrendering her soul to you? That's awfully flowery. I mean, it just sounds awfully flowery. So he uses this other term, deep conversion, which sounds like something you'd encounter in a math problem. And okay, whatever. If you want to call it that, I'll call it that for the duration of this video. It's not the word I would have used. I would have called it falling in love, or, one might almost in a very sarcastic way use the term true love. He goes on to say most guys are simply incapable of inspiring this kind of total soul surrender and devotion in a woman. Most women never get to feel it, and instead must get off on deep conversion light through sugar rush books like 50 Shades of Grey. I love this quote. Tomassi uses this quote in his own article. It's very funny, and it's very accurate. I've known so many women who've been hooked on romance novels like it's a drug, and I don't understand it. I really can't read romance novels. I read the Twilight series because everybody was talking about how good it was, and so I figured I'd give it a try, and it was a book. It wasn't the greatest book. It was a book. I mean, eventually, after reading, however many 100 pages of it, you start to wonder, okay, well, what happens to Bella and Edward? Like, there's a bunch of vampires, and okay. And I mean, I read it, and it wasn't too horrible, but I mean, then I tried to read 50 Shades of Grey, and I couldn't get past the first chapter. Like, I could not complete the first chapter. I could barely complete the first 2 pages. It was just, no. I was just so no. Mm-mm. And so if you guys ever do, like, if I do one of my polls, like, which book do you want me to read next, and it's like, one of them is 50 Shades of Grey, if you want me to see me looking really uncomfortable and going, this is so bad, 50 Shades of Grey is the book to select, because I could not stomach it. But I know girls who are just completely hooked on romance novels. I know girls who don't understand how I can't be, in any way thrilled or pleased by reading a romance novel. Like, they don't understand how I don't get anything out of it, and I don't. I read a romance novel when I was like 16, 17-ish, that some of my friends gave me, because my friends were really into romance novels, and they gave me one that was, it was a fun story. It was a good story. I liked it. I've always liked it. Like, I still have a copy of it somewhere. And, I can even read it and enjoy it, because I remember being a teenager and reading this story and being like, why aren't there any attractive people in my hometown? It's not that there weren't attractive people in my hometown, but I will say there weren't, because there really weren't many at all. And most of those were taken. But, yeah, romance novels just never did anything for me. And so when he says, getting off on romance, on deep conversion light, no thank you. I'll settle for the real thing. I traveled halfway across the continent, and I spoke with thousands of men, literally thousands, just so that I could get my hands on the real thing. And now I've got it. It is interesting, though, when I think of the idea that most women are incapable of causing it in a woman, and most women are, they never find it in a man. It does make me wonder, this deep conversion, this soul surrender, this total love, at which point she just stops questioning, and she stops moving on from a guy. And we're going to get more into that as I read these quotes. And I'm quoting heavily from both these articles, because I think there are guys out there who are going to be like, you're just being flowery, you're just being feminist, you're just being romanticist. It's like, no, these are the words they wrote. I'm going to have them up on the screen. You can take it up with them if you want to. It's not all my fault, and maybe I'm interpreting these articles incorrectly. That's also a possibility. So by all means, tell me that I don't understand it correctly. But this idea that a woman gets to the point where she just She completely falls for a guy, completely, just really and truly. How often does that happen? What percentage of the time does that happen? Because that's a really important question. How many women are just, how many women actually just fall in love with people? How many times do people get married and stay married and actually have a lifelong, committed, loving relationship? Everybody likes to look at it and say, well, that's a very improbable thing. It's very unlikely. There's so many reasons why you shouldn't even try. That's the MGTOW idea. Don't get married. Don't feed the flames. They're just going to feed off of you. It's far too dangerous. It's not likely to succeed. So don't even try. And we don't actually know if that's true. Like, what percentage? I mean, we're hearing in this article, like, most men can't do that for a woman. Fair enough. Most men can't do that for a woman. I've known enough women who are high on romance novels to in any way question that. But what percentage of women are actually finding it? What percentage of men are actually giving it to women? In what cases are people actually forming these bonds? How often does it happen? Has it been reduced by online dating? Oh, probably. Has it been reduced by apps like Tinder? Probably. But, how often does it happen? We don't know that number. So maybe it's not as impossible as MGTOW guys are looking at and saying. Maybe there's a whole subset of the population that's falling in love and getting married and living together in a committed relationship where they both maintain long-standing, deep love for one another. If it's even if it's 1 in 10 people who get married, that's still, it's not great. You'd like that number to be higher. You'd like it to be every person who gets married, but that's still 10%. Maybe it's 20%. 20% is a big number. People waste a lot of money at casinos for less than that. Then again, they lose a lot more if they fail. But still, I want to know, like, to what extent do women just genuinely fall in love with a man? And when I say genuinely falling in love with a man, let's find this other quote here. Okay, we're going back to Rollo Tomassi's deep conversion article. For women, this deep conversion can only result from a man who so thoroughly satisfies her hypergamous nature, she's willing to abandon her own sexual strategy. And, like the guy with one-itis, she dedicates herself to the one guy she was able to, she thinks, lock down, who was a better-than-deserved hypergamous prospect. Women get very upset when this dedication is questioned, not unlike the one-itis guy, because they've generally abandoned furthering their sexual strategy by investing their egos into a guy who satisfied their hypergamous natures. To doubt this devotion is to doubt the wisdom of her investment, and that goes down to her evolved biology and psychology in that choice. I should note here that alpha widows are born from this conversion. Okay, so if I make a lifelong commitment to a guy and I fall deeply in love with him and I choose to continue building that love, because you could go through hard times. Sometimes you have to traverse periods where you don't see each other as often as you'd like. Sometimes life happens at you and things aren't as easy as they would otherwise be. And if you love the other person, you continue to invest yourself in continuing the bond that you have with them. Otherwise, the two of you can very easily just drift apart. You make that kind of a lifelong investment, and you continuously, as the years passed, put energy and effort into that investment. And you love this person, and you make it your business to love this person. And someone comes along and questions it, and you say, "Excuse me, like, do you know how hard I've worked to stay with this person through thick and thin?" And Tomassi then says, of course, that to doubt that devotion is to doubt the wisdom of her investment. Or maybe I just get ticked off that someone's saying that I would leave this guy after all these years of commitment and devotion. Like, these are years and years of my life and my time, my youth and my beauty that I put into something that I believe in. I'm not saying that you can doubt the wisdom of it, but by all means, doubt the wisdom as much as you want. Don't go doubting the depth of commitment that is involved here, because that shit is solid. I do like that he mentions that alpha widows are born from this conversion. And alpha widowing is always something that just terrified me, because I had such a difficult time finding a mate in the first place. 2,500 men, approximately. Maybe more, maybe a little bit less. Not less. Probably more. That's way too many guys to have to talk to just to find your Prince Charming over there. That is a lot of work. That's a lot of effort. And the idea that alpha widowing could occur on top of that to make it any more difficult, just, it scared the pants off me. It's like, oh God, how could I, how would I ever manage with that? I'd be a spinster for the rest of my life, just guaranteed. So alpha widowing was always this creepy and terrifying idea to me, because it's like, I just wasn't willing to settle for anything less. And everybody was telling me, I was 22, 21, 23, all those years. People were telling me, well, you need to lower your standards. You're expecting too much. And it's like, I'm sorry, I can't ask for less than this. And I would rather be alone than settle for less than this. And so I was pretty well planning out my life, like, okay, I guess there's going to come a point where I'm not as young and pretty as I used to be, and no one's going to want to date me, and I'm going to have to provide for myself, and I'm just going to live alone. I was looking at 28 being the magic number, at which point, like, if I had reached 28 and I hadn't found somebody, I was going to try and get my hands on a sperm donor so that I could at least have one unit of offspring, because I couldn't see myself ever finding somebody. Like, it just didn't seem like it was going to happen. And then I found my husband, which is all great and wonderful, and I'm very happy about that. But the alpha widowing, like, I get it. I get that so much. It is a terrifying, terrifying concept for me, because I could not find a suitable mate, and I was terrified of being, and not terrified of being alone, but I was so damn lonely, and I was afraid that there just wasn't anybody who was ever going to match up to my criteria. And it was like, after meeting as many guys as I met, that seemed like a very realistic possibility. And it's like, I faced that. I faced that at, 22 and 23, that maybe I'm just not going to find what I'm looking for. I see all these women in their 30s facing it now and going, oh my God, I'm running out of time. And I look at their situation, it's like, yeah, you're living in your own private horror show. You're living your nightmares right now, lady. I'm so sorry. And at the same time, you did do this to yourself. Me at 23, it was like, well, I don't know why I'm the way I am, but I can't make myself feel attraction for men I don't feel attraction for. And because I can't make myself feel attraction for men that I don't feel attraction for, I guess I'm just going to be single for a very long time, and there's nothing I can do about it. I tried dating men I wasn't attracted to, and I left them very suddenly and very quickly, and it was not good for them, and I realized that. And so I didn't do it again. Like, okay, this is bad. Don't do it. I was trying to be normal. I was just trying to do what you're supposed to do, and I didn't know how to make it work because I wasn't attracted to them, and I couldn't become attracted to them. You can't negotiate desire. Well, I couldn't. Women critics of this differing love concepts dynamic, unsurprisingly, personalize every experience they have, their friends have, or their family ever had by referring to examples of their own selfless acts of devotion to a certain man. It's always a story about how they gave everything to a often unappreciative, unreciprocating man they felt some undying, idealistic love for themselves, and how dare I impugn their sincerity in it. Oof. I know he's looking at it as, okay, this is another episode of female solipsism and women putting the rosy glasses of true love over, what he's trying to say when he talks about differing views of love, differing concepts of love, and different types of love that men and women bring to the table when they bring love to the table. But maybe they're not being solipsistic. Maybe they have a point. Like, maybe they have a point. Maybe these women who are talking about, like, just giving this deep, devoted love to a man, that they're constantly just feeding into, even if he's unappreciative, even if he's some, bad boy who just takes them and, takes everything they give him and runs with it. And what if they have a point? What if there is some way that a woman can love a man deeply and fully and give herself to him deeply and fully, like a deep conversion, where there is this kind of idealistic, just love, not a transactional kind of love, not a I love you for the things you can do for me, but a point where it all just becomes this blanketing love. That's it. I'm completely devoted to you 100%. That's it. And he goes on to say, and again, I'll add that the only way they came to this idealistic love was through a deep conversion they had with a man who satisfied their hypergamous opportunism long before they were ever inspired to those selfless acts of devotion and sacrifice. It's like he's justifying it somehow, but it's like, well, no kidding. Of course we had to. Anytime any human being falls in love with somebody, they're going to have to weigh them up and figure out whether or not they want to invest their emotions in that other person. With men, it can be slightly easier superficially, because men can look at a woman and decide whether or not she's a fit partner on a biological level. It's like, okay, is she fertile? Well, she looks fertile, and she's moving like she's healthy, and she's acting like she's healthy, and she's giving off all the subconscious cues of being healthy. And men pick up on that shit amazingly quickly, and strip clubs are a great place to observe men picking up on it very, very astutely and very, very accurately. Men pick up on it just amazingly well. Human beings in general do. Like women size up the competition too. But men can make those much quicker kinds of snap judgments, and then when they get to know the girl a little bit, it's like, oh well, she's loyal and she's nurturing, so she'd probably be a good mother and maybe a good wife, and that's it. Boom, you have the recipe for love. I can love this woman because she ticks these boxes. She is physically fit, attractive to me. She is nurturing, so she would be good for raising offspring. She seems to be loyal. Your boxes are pretty well checked. You're done. You've already determined that she is a fit partner, a viable partner to pair with and breed with, because she's physically fit. And you also have the subconscious, if not necessarily, the laws make things tricky these days, so not exactly real, but the old idea that you could, if she turns out to be, kind of a dud, you could abandon her for another physically fit woman. But men fall in love in this way. Women have to assess a man very carefully in a much different way, at a much different level, to determine whether he's a fit partner. Yeah, you've got your physical features. Is he taller than me? Okay. Does he have good facial features and evenly distributed facial features? Is everything nice and symmetrical? That's all good and well, but then she has to evaluate who he is. What's he done? What's the mettle of the man? And I know a lot of people look at that as does he have money? Does he drive a nice car? Is he rich? Is he charming? But it's what's his spirit? What's inside of his spirit? Does he have any fire inside of him, or is he just weak-spirited and kind of milquetoast? Does he have any strength to him? And physical strength is something a lot of girls go after, but I don't know. For me, at least, physical strength was never nearly as impressive to me as just as metal deep inside. Does he have strength of spirit? Is he strong-minded, strong-willed? Is he smart enough to get himself out of trouble? Intelligence is the weapon of humanity. It's not necessarily brawn. We have guns now. What do we need brawn for? So, I don't know. That was me, though. I understand that I tend to be a little odd, but women have to size up men. We have to evaluate them very carefully. And if in the course of that evaluation we come to the conclusion that this is a hypergamously ideal partner, well, haven't we simply figured out that this person is a good partner in the same way that a man looks at a woman's nice ass and bubbly, bouncy tits and says, hey, that's a good partner for me? Like, isn't it the same kind of evaluation? I have assessed you for, for potential, ideal mating conditions, and you have them, so now I can afford to invest in you emotionally. And I get what Rollo Tomassi is saying. He's saying that, that women who argue against hypergamy and women who argue against different kinds of love or different places that love comes from, depending on your gender, they argue against that because they don't like this idea that, women have a hypergamous side to them. They don't like this idea that women have different places where love originates inside their minds. But at the same time, just because I look at a guy and say, okay, you are a person that is worthy of my love, how is that any different from a guy looking at me and saying, okay, you are a person that is worthy of my love? We're both coming to the same conclusion. We're both making the same assessment. We're both inspired to selfless acts of devotion and sacrifice, according to Tomassi. There's a part of me that looks at it and says, okay, well, how is this different? And ultimately, it does seem in many ways to be the same thing. And I think that's why I got so annoyed when I first read these articles. It's like, women are always asking, well, can I do better? Except when they're not. That was the first impression I got, and I know that's not exactly what he's saying. And I know that it's really, really very, very delicate and nuanced, and you have to say it right in order to get the idea across accurately. But there was a part of me that was very annoyed. It's like, couldn't you have included this in your first book? It seems like kind of a valuable point. And again, I think he wrote the first book like several years before he wrote this particular blog post. But yeah, kind of a big deal. Like, if you're going to say, well, women don't love the way men do, and women don't love the way men expect them to, and women who argue against that, they're just being solipsistic and they're not being insightful because women aren't particularly insightful or whatever. You can say all that, but you need to include this part too, that sometimes a woman she finds a man, she decides, this is my hypergamous ideal. This is what I'm looking for in a mate. I have decided this is it. And she just stops looking for anything else because she's done. She hit that mark. She's succeeded. This is my hypergamously ideal option. Yay! That problem's out of the way. I don't need to go looking anymore. I'm done. I can focus on getting pregnant with my hypergamously ideal option and making lots and lots and lots of babies with him. I've seen a few guys, we were talking about abortion at one point, they were like, Chad's baby never gets aborted. No, Chad's baby never gets aborted, unless you're in my circumstances where Chad's baby is definitely going to die no matter what you do, and then you kind of have to. Well, you might not, you might choose not to, but we decided to. But, generally speaking, if it's a viable baby, if it's going to survive, Chad's baby does not get aborted. Chad has many babies in this world. Many, especially with the ready availability of abortion. Suddenly, many of the babies in this world are Chad's baby. Now, Chad varies from woman to woman. There are plenty of women in this world who, this guy is my ideal guy, and other women look at it and go, oh, okay, if you say so. We have different criteria. It's all based on the same sets of ideas, but we place different levels of value on different things as individuals. And that's something to be aware of. Just because you're not Prince Charming for one girl, that doesn't mean that the next girl who comes along isn't going to think that you're Prince Charming. It just means that, maybe this one doesn't like you, so you keep going out and you keep trying. That's the whole reason behind the go out and keep trying idea. pickup artists are always saying, oh, just keep on going out and practicing. Number one, it gives you practice so you get better at it. Number two, just because one girl isn't really into you, that doesn't mean that the next girl who comes along isn't going to be wildly nuts over you. For the red pill game aware guy, understanding that this conversion and how to inspire it is something he ought to contemplate, since so much of a woman's ego becomes invested in her devotion to him once that conversion takes place. Conversely, red pill men should also understand, as Nick explained about his ex-wife, that this conversion is always tentative upon his own capacity to perpetuate it. Well, yeah. In Nick Krause's article, he talks about how he had a deconversion with his wife, and I think they were together for like 9 years or something, and then he, as he put it, lost his mojo and she left. And so Tomassi is warning that you have to be able to perpetuate that conversion. I think that's something to be aware of, in the sense that if you're doing the mystery method kind of pickup game, and you aren't being particularly honest with the girl, and she's falling for you and she's falling hard for you, and then at some point in the future she finds out that you lied your ass off, you're not going to be able to continue to maintain her attraction, because when she realizes that you lied to her, she's going to be angry that you lied to her, and she's going to think, okay, you're not really what you displayed yourself as being, so I have no reason to stick around. But I think it takes a lot to shake a deep conversion. I still think it's a funny term. I still think it belongs on a math problem. Like, okay, we're going to round the numbers, and then we're going to do a deep conversion, and that should give us the square root of the answer to the question. But no, I think it's tricky to shake a deep conversion. For all I know, there are different levels or different degrees of deep conversion. For all I know, I don't. But for me, at least, it's like, it would take a bit. He's been pretty steadily the person that I fell in love with. He hasn't changed. He hasn't altered himself. He's stayed committed to the relationship and to the family unit that we agreed to form together. And his commitment to that unit has been unwavering. So, yeah, I don't think we're going anywhere anytime soon. And so, while my love for him might indeed be dependent on his ability to perpetuate this conviction in me that he is the ideal person for me to have married, we've been through a lot of hell together, and we've weathered those storms. And it's not like it was some sort of relationship fight that we had between ourselves over any of the petty things couples fight about. It was just life stuff hitting us again and again. Yay, we're pregnant. Great, now it's ectopic. I'm going to need abdominal surgery. Well, now I'm scarred up, so I'm not doing as well at work as I used to do. And I'm not as pretty as I used to be. Yay, we're pregnant again. Well, now I'm scarred up from that too. And I'm in chronic pain. I was in chronic pain for a year until my second child was born, and they could go in and surgically fix some of the damage from my first delivery, which was a little bit rockier than I would have liked. That was chronic pain for a year. That was fun. Chronic pain in the places you don't want to have chronic pain. That all happened. We got through that. He was gone for work a bunch really, really early in our kids' lives because he was trying to provide for the family, and I wasn't able to earn as much money because I was all scarred up in the abdominal region. And, he was gone all the time. I missed him really horribly. We weathered that. Like, we got through a bunch of life stuff, and it's like, it's not a fragile thing. This whole deep conversion stuff, it's really not a fragile thing. Yeah, you can screw it up. If you really just stop trying and you let the relationship go to shit and you don't care about it and you don't take care of it like a fragile, tender young plant as it first starts sprouting, then yeah, it can fall apart. But it's not exactly the most fragile thing you'll ever encounter, I don't think. I tried to find other articles on deep conversion, and all I found was a mention of it in Women's Red Pill. And one of the moderators had this to say about it. I'm honestly skeptical of the actual depth of what you call deep conversion. It sounds like the stuff of very intense, less-than-lifetime love affairs. I think it's an illusion that can't be sustained over a lifetime, and in reality has an upper limit of perhaps 7 years, hence the cliche of the 7-year itch. Relationships that are still going at 15, 25, and 50 years don't realistically suffer illusions about their partner's nature and the relationship's problematic points. They might start out with the chimera of deep conversion. However, there comes a point in most very long relationships where illusions are shattered and self-deceptions are faced. Relationships that survive this tend to come out on the other side with the partners still determined to stay together and adjusting their attraction internally and relationship behavior externally, despite seeing the flaws and problems. I get what he's saying, I get what he's saying, but I think he's wrong. I just think he's wrong. I think if people form a sexual relationship too early on and they haven't had a chance to weigh the other person very carefully and figure out what their faults are and what their flaws are, later on in life, later on in the relationship, they have that nasty slap in the face moment where they realize, oh, I guess he's not perfect after all, and they can either choose to stay with him or her, or they can accept the fact that this person was not what they originally assumed, and they were so busy being, in love that they just kind of, didn't notice these flaws until time had passed. 7 years, 2 years, whatever that itch is. I know that the point at which the brand new love hormones start to ebb away is always kind of a shock to the system, where it's like, okay, they talk about the honeymoon phase. There is a point at which, you have these new sex relationship hormones just flowing through you, and then eventually they start to shift over to more long-term relationship hormones. And when you kind of get that point where you're not getting your drug high of the new sex, that can be a little bit jarring. I think it's jarring for a lot of people. It was kind of jarring for me. It was like, wait a minute, where's my happy hormone dose? Come on, bring it. Let's get this on. But, we got through that. I didn't stop loving him. He didn't stop loving me. We stayed together. Once we got through the hormonal shift, once I got through the hormonal shift, I noticed that, we still loved each other. We're still getting lots of happy feelings and happy vibes from the relationship, so it wasn't like it went away. It was just a very unusual chemical change. And I noticed it. I don't know if I noticed it. It wasn't the hugest stumbling block in the world, but it was a little strange. It was unusual. But that wasn't the point at which I was going, oh, I just realized that, I've been fooling myself about his flaws. No, he was still the same man I married. This idea that your illusions about the other person, you have to address them, sometime like before the 7-year mark. Well, we've been together about 10 years at this point, and we haven't had any shattering of illusions going on. We haven't had to address our relationship's problematic points. I mean, we have problems that come up as time passes. We have differences of handling problems. We have issues that arise. We talk about them. We solve them. We work together to create solutions for them. We do couple stuff. It's not like everything is just hunky-dory over here and they never have any kinds of problems. There are things that I do that drive him up the wall. There are things he does that drive me up the wall. We talk about them. We address them. It's like, okay, how do we make ways to drive each other up the wall less? Thus my dishwasher and my dryer running like crazy. But it's not like there was some moment at any point in a relationship thus far where it's like, oh my God, I just realized that you're just not the person I thought you were. It's like, nope, you're exactly who I thought you were. You're exactly what I thought you were. I haven't had to adjust my attraction internally. Yeah, that hasn't happened. No. And relationship behavior externally, despite seeing the flaws and problems. No, I'm sorry. Mm-mm. We worked really, 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 really hard on getting to know each other really, really, really well before we even began a romantic relationship. And once we began the romantic relationship, we began working on deciding our future together very carefully. We asked all the hard questions very carefully. How many kids do you want? Do you want kids? What about religion? Are we going to be Catholic? I looked and said, let's just have me convert to Catholicism. We'll have a unified family religion. It's better for everybody that way. I'll do that. It was not easy for me. It was not comfortable for me. I have a slight phobia of churches, which is not the greatest thing if you want to be Catholic. I forced myself to do that because it just added to the stability of a relationship. And I grew up Episcopalian, so it wasn't a big jump. But, we worked on building up us. We worked on getting to know each other very, very, very well. We didn't have a moment where it was like, oh man, I just didn't see that about you. I didn't realize that was going to be a problem. There have been moments where it's like, I didn't realize this was going to be a problem for us. He's had them, I've had them. But it wasn't one of those, oh, now I've got to adjust my behavior externally and my attraction internally, and I've got to change all these things. It's like, well, I didn't know this was going to be a problem. I guess we're going to have to work with this. Okay, let's work with it. I get what he's saying, and it's not necessarily bad advice for relationships in general, but when he questions the actual depth of deep conversion, I'm just not buying it. I don't think it's... I'm not entirely buying it. I think that... I think that there might be people running around in the world who've never actually seen a situation where deep conversion has occurred, and I'm pretty certain that I'm one of these cases of deep conversion. I know there's a bunch of guys who are going to point out that you've got nothing to go on but my word for it, and that's true, and it's unfortunate. You've got nothing to go on but my word for it. If you look at all my previous videos, or at least all my previous videos regarding hypergamy, or my love for my husband, or my relationship with my husband, you're probably going to notice a recurring theme of very deep conversion types of statements. This was all before I knew that deep conversion existed, because I didn't know that deep conversion existed until 2 weeks ago. So I'm pretty sure that at the very least I've been very consistent in my behavior. I think that's what we've got going on. I think that my situation where I was, we had just, we were kind of toward the tail end of our first date, which was kind of an overnight sort of date. Where I was in the kitchen and I was making coffee, and I was thinking about, is this it? Is this the best you can do? Is this really what you want? Is this your final answer? I think that was the point at which I finally switched over from, this guy is the most, and when I say switched over, I mean switched over with finality. Up until that point, it was like, this guy is the most interesting guy I've ever met. This guy is the most attractive man I think I've ever met. This guy is the guy that I really, really cannot afford to lose, so I have to be very, very careful in dealing with him because I don't ever want to lose him. All of that. But that point in the kitchen with the coffee maker, as he was walking into the kitchen and I was looking at him and just weighing him up so carefully, I saw his flaws. I saw that he was human, and that's important in a relationship. You need to see the other person. You can't just have this blurring of love obstructing your vision. You have to see them, the good and the bad, the pretty and the ugly. You have to see it all. And that's the only way you can really weigh them accurately. And I think there are plenty of girls who, they weigh guys inaccurately. My high school sweetheart who banged me in the back of his pickup in a way that I've never been banged before or since. I'm 38 years old and I still haven't forgotten him, and I'm married to this schlub, and he's unattractive, but at least he pays the bills, and at night when I'm going to bed with him, I'm either reading romance novels or I'm fantasizing about the back of that one guy's pickup again. You probably could have done a little bit better of a job of assessing whether or not this guy and his pickup was exactly your hypergamous ideal for you, but in my case at least, for myself, and probably for a lot of other women, it's the guy I married, and I watched him like a hawk. I was very, very suspicious of him. And once I came to that conclusion, I want to marry this man, it switched off. And that was it. We're done. So, are women capable of love? Yes, women can absolutely feel love. And sometimes they even feel this deep conversion love, which is, a pretty impressive thing. And when he says women ego invest in it, I get that women ego invest in it. I get that I've ego invested in it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I chose to invest myself in a family unit. This is reproductively the very best thing I could possibly be doing for myself. I have 3 healthy, happy offspring who are growing up in a very stable, healthy environment. This is my best case scenario. And I can't see any other scenario that would be better than this. This is it. This is ideal. I have my offspring. I have them with a very, very healthy, fit mate who is, hypergamously satisfactory to me. Will I meet other better men someday? Well, I might find a demigod one of these days. They might actually exist in this world, and he'd have to be some sort of demigod, but they might exist. But am I ever going to have this beautiful stability and this lovely nest that I've built with my partner for our offspring, which I've already produced? It's not like I can wind back the clock and then reproduce, produce other offspring again. I've already done that part too. This is it, and it's a good thing to make that ego investment. Like, I see nothing wrong with this. It looks like it looks like everything is working by design to me from where I'm sitting. So, yes, women can love deeply, and yes, women can make these huge ego investments in men, and yeah, that's not a bad thing. This is, I think, the way we're supposed to be doing it. When we're not constantly opposing each other and say, girl power versus, I don't know, that men don't really have a girl power phrase. Give it a few years and I'm sure they'll come up with one or something. That's it. It's been a long video. It's been over an hour. I'm going to have to edit this a lot to add all the quotes and text in. I'm not going to sleep tonight. I will talk to you guys later. Oh, hey there, buddy. Hey, you. Do you want to come over here? Do you want to say hi to the camera? This guy hates me, but I've been feeding him chicken lately, so now all of a sudden, 1, 2, 3, and hey, you have the sharpest claws in the entire house because you're not patient enough to let us trim them, and now you're stuck to my sweater. You're stuck to my sweater, aren't you? Ah.